And now, on the video, we're going to address, in our next session, something which is absolutely critical, which is the challenge of accommodating energy transition in Africa. And for that, I have the great pleasure to welcome Dr. Kevin Kariuki, who will be with us on the screen. Dr. Kariuki is the Vice President for Power, Energy, Climate Change, and Green Growth at African Development Bank. Thanks a lot for being with us, and please a round of applause to welcome you.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Kariuki, my first question would be, there are 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa that at the moment are lacking basic access to electricity, and 1 billion that are lacking access to clean energy cooking. So what are the main hurdles that you see that needs to be passed away to take that challenge into account?
Thanks very much for the question, Jean-Jacques. But first, let me start by regretting that I'm unable to participate in this event in person due to scheduling considerations. But back to your question, let me further contextualize Africa's energy situation first by sharing two additional perspectives. At less than 200 kilowatt hours per year, Africa's per capita energy consumption is the lowest globally, and even less than the energy a family fridge consumes in a year in the USA. As a result, Africa accounts for only 6% of global energy demand and about 3% of electricity demand. The continent, we must say, is energy poor. Well, why is this so? This is because modern energy has largely been unaffordable. Secondly, interspersed populations made grid extensions and connection of customers unviable. There was also a lack of generation capacity. However, rising incomes and rapid urbanization are expected to combine to push electricity demand to at least double by 2040. But then, the following hurdles, which you sort of asked me to address, must be overcome to close the gaps in access to modern energy. The first is affordability. The dramatic fall in cost of solar technology makes electricity access through mini grids and solar home systems affordable. Meanwhile, the development of carbon markets will be key to making clean cooking solutions reasonably priced for the populations. As the cost competitiveness of battery energy storage technology improves the availability of electricity for extended periods. Africa must also attract renewable energy investments at an unprecedented scale and speed. According to the International Energy Agency, the continent requires $25 billion per year to achieve universal access to modern energy by 2030, while another $4 billion per year is required for full access to clean cooking over the same period. Yet, Africa currently accounts for only 2% of global renewable energy investments, amounting to $6 billion only. The financing must also be affordable, as Africa currently pays 2 to 3 times the cost of financing compared to the rest of the world. Additionally, Africa must generate a robust pipeline of bankable renewable energy projects to provide modern energy. And this is why the African Development Bank established the highly concessional $533 million Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, or just SEFA, to de-risk projects and crowd in private sector investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency. When fully rolled out, SEFA will leverage approximately $15 billion of investments and deliver 10 gigawatts of power generation to supply 5 million people. It is also for this reason that, along with our partners, we are establishing the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, or AGIA, to generate a robust pipeline of green infrastructure projects that will in turn attract $10 billion of equity and debt investments. AGIA was recently endorsed by the G7, whose members have committed over $150 million for its project development pillar. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you mentioned the fact that Africa's total GHG emissions represent a very limited part of the total emissions in the world. This being said, Africa is one of the continents that is the most affected by the climate crisis. So can you explain a little as well how your institution is focusing on adaptation and support resilience of the African economies to the impact of climate change, which is, of course, something important for the investors in the room?
Again, thank you very much, Jack. But please allow me to provide two additional insights on Africa's climate. According to the Global Center on Adaptation, Africa's climate change is locked in for the next 20 years. The World Meteorological Organization also reports that Africa is warming 50% faster than the global average. This means that Africa will continue to face increasingly frequent and severe weather events. Last year's Cyclone Freddy and the floods in Kenya and Tanzania last month, as well as the current drought in South Africa, attest to this. We must therefore invest in adaptation and resilient building. But adaptation and resilient building efforts, such as agriculture and water supply projects, or seawalls to reduce risk from rising sea levels, or projects to improve weather prediction, etc., are not commercially attractive. They will not yield the investment returns most of the investors on this forum would seek. Hence, the African Development Bank has doubled down on building Africa's adaptive capacity and resilience, and I'll give the following examples. Firstly, we are increasing the continent's access to adaptation finance. Since 2020, the bank has mobilized $8.3 billion in adaptation finance, which has led to programs such as the Technologies for Africa Agricultural Transformation, or just TAT. TAT is delivering heat-tolerant and drought-resistant crops to help countries build their resilience and increase productivity amid more frequent and severe droughts. For example, the program has supported Ethiopia to increase acreage under wheat from 5,000 hectares to 1.2 million hectares, which in 2022 increased its wheat productivity by 1.6 million metric tons, enabling the country to achieve self-sufficient for the first time in history in only 3 years after introduction of the program. Thanks to TAT, Ethiopia will be a net exporter of wheat in 2024, despite harsher weather conditions. Secondly, in 2021, the bank, in partnership with the Global Center on Adaptation, established the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program to mobilize $25 billion by 2025 for adaptation action on the continent. AAP, as we call it, is one of the largest adaptation efforts in the world. We have also recently operationalized a climate action window that supports the most climate vulnerable and least adaptive countries in Africa. 75% of the climate action window's proceeds will be allocated for adaptation. We expect to mobilize $4 billion in the medium term and $13 billion in the longer term of the window.
Thank you very much. I would like to end this conversation on a very practical questions. Can you tell us a little more about the big renewable projects you're working on in Africa and on which you may seek the participation of investors?
Our current flagship renewable project is the Desert to Power project. Some of you may have heard it. This is a programmatic initiative that seeks to develop 10,000 megawatts of solar generation capacity to supply electricity to some 250 million people across the Sahel, from Senegal in the west to Ethiopia and Eritrea in the east. We have already raised $1 billion, including $150 million from the Green Climate Fund for projects in Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger. The project was recently appraised by the Financial Times editorial for its transformative potential in improving the quality of life of Sahelians. Other projects focusing on renewable power here are the 1,500 megawatt Mpanda and Pua hydropower project in Mozambique, in which we are a strategic advisor to the government of Mozambique. We have worked with the government to enlist the interest of world-class developers for the approximately $4.5 billion project. We have another 206 megawatt Ruzizi 3 hydroelectric project, which I actually had the privilege of working on before I joined the bank, whose output will be shared equally amongst Burundi, DRC, and Rwanda. It will double Burundi's generation capacity, increase Rwanda's generation capacity by 21%, and become the primary source of baseload generation in eastern DRC. We are also helping the government of Zambia and Zimbabwe restructure and redesign the Batoka Gorge hydropower project, which we expect to be about 1,000 megawatts, limited by hydrological conditions due to changes in the climate. We are also re-engaging the government of DRC to agree on an approach for rekindling the development of the 4,800 megawatt Inga 3 hydropower project, which portends great promise for DRC and indeed the SADC region. Overall, the abundant renewable energy sources that include 60% of the world's best solar resources, of which less than 1% has been tapped, and over 350 gigawatts of hydroelectric potential, of which less than 7% has been harnessed, stand Africa's energy transition in great strength. The abundant renewable energy sources also augur well for Africa's ambition of increasing renewable energy generation from 300 to 300 gigawatts by 2030 from the current 56 gigawatts, which is greater than COP28's UAE consensus call for tripling for renewable energy by 2030.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kariuki, for sharing with us all these opportunities. I think solutions are there in Africa, so please a round of applause for Dr. Kariuki for sharing that. Thank you very much.